Hey there horror fam, welcome to the first in my new video series, Scary Scenes and Non-Horror Flicks. I will be analyzing a series of scenes featured in movies that aren't necessarily considered horror, but the scenes themselves are pretty damn horrific. Now first up is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, released in 2004. Now, I'm going to begin this video with a bit of a controversial statement. Are you ready? Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is still my favorite comic book film of all time. You heard me right. Out of all the DC and Marvel properties that we've gotten over the years, Spider-Man 2 still comes out on top for me. I think it perfectly captures the character of Spider-Man. The plot focuses on Peter Parker trying to maintain a balance between his personal life and his life as a superhero, and it does it wonderfully. It's Sam Raimi at the top of his game. Sam Raimi, as you know, is the legendary director of such horror classics as The Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, and don't forget Army of Darkness, that kick-ass medieval action romp.
Give me some sugar, baby.
And the scene I'm going to be talking about today is the infamous horror hospital scene in Spider-Man 2, where Dr. Octopus's mechanical arms come to life and slaughter a bunch of helpless doctors. Now, a little bit of backstory first. First appearing in The Amazing Spider-Man number 3, Dr. Octopus has always been seen as the antithesis of Peter Parker / Spider-Man. He's essentially what Peter could have become if he hadn't been raised by two morally upright figures, that being Aunt May and Uncle Ben. With his genius-level intellect and physical prowess, Dr. Octopus is more than a match for Spider-Man, and is arguably the web-slinger's greatest foe.
As you can see, molten metal penetrated the spinal cavity and fused the vertebra at multiple points, including the lamina and the roof of the spinal column.
As much as I adore this scene, I do find it a little bit humorous that the doctors are just now going over what's physically wrong with Octavius. It would be like if I went into the hospital with a broken femur bone and they waited until I was passed out on the operating table to start examining me. I mean, anesthesia only lasts so long, guys. I mean, get your priorities straight.
We won't know the extent of the damage until we get in there, so I suggest we cut off these mechanical arms, slice up the harness, and if need be, consider a laminectomy with posterior spinal fusion from C7T1 to T12.
We're ready, Doctor.
Now, the puppet work in this movie was done by Edge Effects, and apparently the filmmakers were so impressed by their puppet work that they decided to keep in many of the practical shots. Now, the arms themselves, they only used CGI arms during some of the more intense action bits, and when they were actually carrying Alfred Molina. Very impressive puppet work. They still hold up incredibly well to this day. And also, this is the first time we see how long these arms can get, because in the previous scene, the arms were much shorter and not fully stretched out. Here, they are fully extended, which makes them look way more terrifying.
Anybody here take shop class?
He's the funny guy in the hospital. He probably took comedy lessons from Patch Adams. Oh, just the image of the spinning blade near his eyeball. It's like something you would see out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something. It's just so horrific, and here we go, guys. This is when shit gets real. Oh, that shadow on the wall is just so eerie. It legitimately looks like a monster is attacking her. It is just fantastic, and I just love the angles that Raimi uses in this scene. Like, he really knows how to make an effective horror sequence. This is just amazing to watch. I love it to death. Now, one interesting thing to note is that this scene is completely bloodless. So Raimi came up with all these clever ways of killing off the doctors. And even when a character is impaled on screen, it's very quick and not incredibly gory. And, there are other ways of killing them off, like electrocution, and, it's that PG-13 horror, which many fans loathe. But honestly, if you have a talented filmmaker behind the camera, you can do an effective horror movie that's rated PG-13. I mean, obviously, Spider-Man 2 isn't considered a horror movie, but I mean, scenes like this, I mean, you can make it work. It can be done. Also, Drag Me to Hell was another Raimi movie that is rated PG-13, and that movie is also worth checking out. Check out Drag Me to Hell. Oh, I remember hearing a collective groan in the audience during that moment, and it just goes to show that you don't need over-the-top violence to be scary. A helpless woman being dragged into the abyss can be just as terrifying as seeing her being torn to shreds. Forces you to use your imagination, which can be a million times more unnerving. Whoop, there's the classic Sam Raimi snap zoom. One of his classic trademarks. He used it a lot in the Evil Dead movies. Trivia! The Doctor in this shot is none other than John Landis, director of An American Werewolf in London, and that just makes me feel all giddy inside. Now, I understand Bruce Campbell already made a cameo earlier in the film, which, granted, was a hilarious scene, but how cool would it have been if Raimi had cast The Chin as the Doctor who uses the chainsaw? Ash vs. Doc Ock? There's a spin-off series for you. That would have resulted in millions of horror fans like myself just screaming for joy. What an ingenious way to pay homage to the fast-moving point-of-view shots in the Evil Dead movies. Man. Sam Raimi must have felt like a kid in a candy shop while directing this scene. And really, this scene feels ripped straight out of one of Raimi's early horror features, minus the over-the-top gore. Speaking of which, check out Darkman. That's one of his lesser-known features, but that is another dark comic book feature that Sam Raimi invented himself, and it's another worthwhile title. Please check out Darkman. I know some comic book fans took issue with the fact that Octavius is being manipulated by the mechanical arms, but it really adds to the tragedy of the character because he's clearly not doing this of his own free will. He's a good-natured, kind-hearted scientist who becomes a victim of his own creation. It's the classic Frankenstein scenario. He wanted to save the world, but instead he ends up ruining his life. It also leads to one of the greatest no's in cinema. Take notes, Darth Vader. That's how you do a no. Such a fantastic scene. Second only to the monorail fight featured later in the film. And this scene combines two of Sam Raimi's great loves, comic books and horror. And I wish we had seen more of this in Spider-Man 3. Like, if there was ever a film that needed to be more of a horror movie, it was Spider-Man 3. Because God knows, that film just ended up being a complete embarrassment, for the most part. But yes, this was Sam Raimi at the top of his game, and it's one of the many reasons why Spider-Man 2 is still my favorite comic book film of all time. But yes, guys, thank you so much for joining me in my discussion of the horror hospital scene in Spider-Man 2. I had a really fun time talking about this with you guys, and let me know if you have any suggestions. I have some scenes lined up, some scenes that I would love to talk about, scary scenes in non-horror flicks. I'm very excited to continue this series, and again, let me know if you have any suggestions. Leave them down below, and if you have any other questions for me, please let me know. If you liked what you saw here, please subscribe to our channel, Round the Clock Frights. We deliver horrific content weekly, and as always, guys, have a very scary day, and to all of you boils and ghouls out there, stay scary. Have a good one, guys. Take care.